Bold leaders, no buzzwords, no BS. This is Mastering Workplace Culture, real talk on crafting workplace cultures that deliver results. Each episode, we go beyond corporate speak and talk with leaders who've actually done it. Those who've faced breakdowns, made bold moves, and built organizations where respect and results carry equal weight. If you're ready to challenge assumptions, gain actionable inspiration from proven mentors, and build a workplace culture that actually works, this podcast is for you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Mastering Workplace Culture. Our guest today is Tim Steinbeck of GRE HERC Services. He's the CEO there. He boasts 46 years of executive leadership of waste to energy and other energy operations. In 2018, Tim led the formation of a new company to take over the operation of an energy plant owned by Hennepin County in Minneapolis. Tim is a board member of the Minnesota Resource Recovery Association and has a unique perspective on culture transformation within a primary blue-collar organization. Tim and his wife, Mary, have 3 married adult children and 6 grandchildren. Tim, we're tied there now. And fun fact, Tim, although he now embraces the Minnesota cabin life, was born in Hawaii. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you. Great to be here with you.
Well, and we've enjoyed working with GRE HERC Services for 2.5 years plus, I think, Tim, if I can
Most of 3, I think.
It's wild. That's pretty cool. And one of the wonderful things that authors like Mark and me have is when somebody calls up and says, we bought your book. That's exactly what Tim did. Tim, you had started Good Comes First, and then I think you shared it with the leadership team because you were pretty convinced that the culture wasn't working very well and it could be better. And that's what we're going to talk about. So way back when, what led you and the leadership team to realize that the culture may have been holding the organization back?
Well, Mark, you mentioned we took over the operation of an existing facility back in 2018. We pretty much assumed all of the employees that the previous operator had at that facility. And we started running the plant or leading the workers that previously ran the plant. And, for the first year or two, it was pretty congenial. But going into the COVID years, we found that as soon as we had to break management away from the in-plant team, that didn't work as well. Eventually, the plant workers were almost adamant that the plant management didn't need to come back to work, and
okay, then
they were fine without us, and just division within groups in the plant, and we just needed to get everybody to be able to speak the same language and talk about the same values and behaviors that that we expect from our employees and employees should expect from their leaders. And so you're right, Chris. I did a little searching, ran across Good Comes First, and that clicked with us. Maybe it doesn't click with every workplace, but it was the tool that we wanted to investigate more at the time. And 3+ years later, we're deep into it and seeing some improvement. We're not there yet, but certainly by developing our own core values that we share. I share those with every new employee that comes on board, and all of our leaders. We review that regularly, and it's been part of the way that we do business here.
Well, and I have to say, we had the opportunity a month ago, Mark, a little more than that, that for the first time, the operations team members, non-formal leaders in the organization, were able to get the feedback of their peers on the floor and even their bosses on the degree to which that they model, they live the behaviors that you all formalized 3 years ago. And of course, the leaders do that all the time, twice a year. But this was the first time that frontline staff had received that kind of feedback. And it can be a little bit intimidating for those folks. And so we had 4 crews we saw. Some of them had been up overnight with the late shift. But it was terrific to learn their perspectives. And of course, they have opinion about what management should be doing, what soup should be doing, what their fellow team should be doing. So some of that is still there's some rubs that still exist. But I think, Mark, and would love your perspective on it. I think they kind of challenged us, the last team did, saying, I haven't seen any changes in 3 years. What the heck have you two been doing? So it's like, okay, Mark, you can handle that answer.
Well, it was true to form. Culture change is not a quick process, and we had to explain that while we had just had been working with Tim and his leadership team for 3 years, the process led us to formalize the culture just about 2 years ago, or at least we started measuring alignment to that culture 2 years ago. And sometimes it takes a while to trickle all the way down. And ultimately, they were incredibly grateful for the opportunity to meet with us, to be heard. We had 4 different meetings. All of them were productive and constructive and respectful, and that's all we could ask. So, Tim, during those meetings, we probably did hear some of what you knew when you did first contact us, and they had some interesting reactions to where the process was at that point. And I was wondering, when you first went to your leadership team and said, look, I got this book, I'm going to get you guys a copy. We need to seriously think about formalizing our culture and not let it be accidental or incidental, but actually draw out what this thing looks like for all of us. And so I was wondering what their reactions were. Did they look at you like you were crazy? Did they look at you like, really? Now, right after COVID, we're doing this? What were their first comments?
Well, to be honest, I think it was pretty positive. You knew our plant manager, Steve Chuba, who's my number one go-to leader here, and he right away embraced it. And then we together discussed it with the rest of our leadership team here. And while there was some, we're not sure what this even is, once we started, digging into what should our values be, what are our values, how do we make them simple enough that our plant team can understand the expectations. We did a couple months of brainstorming and writing them out. We came up with a power plant related acronym, STEAM, because we produce steam here. And so we have safety, trust, accountability, ethics, and mutual respect through that MN. So we make STEAM.
Make STEAM.
And, a couple, 3 or 4 bullet statements for each of those. And they're very understandable. They don't cover everything in the world about relationships between leaders and our workers, but certainly enough that you either are or you aren't embracing those bullet points. And right away we had some that weren't. And, that's a whole another part of our history there, where some of the teams, the members that really bucked that system, chose to leave the organization within a year. And, it's unfortunate, but actually it's been a blessing. So now we have a lot of new people, new faces that we have to integrate and continue to bring into the organization. but we have that undergirding of that common language about our values that we can work with.
Well,
Tim,
and I want to go ahead, Marcus.
just a quick follow-up question, Tim. When those people chose to leave, if my memory serves me, you didn't have to ask anyone to leave. They left voluntarily. As Chris often says, sometimes as a culture change initiative begins, a person looks at us and just goes, you know what? You can't pay me enough to be nice to these people. I just want to do my job. I'm going to go work for somebody else, right? So what was that like for you as CEO? What was it like when you heard that this set number of people were choosing to move on rather than align to the culture? Was it down first and then up? Because you said it was in the end it was worth it, but it couldn't have been easy.
Well, it was a challenging time. Our maintenance leader, he aligned with the values, but he was ex-military, and he was pretty strongly aligned. You either do it or you don't, and those conversations between his team members that didn't align with that were sometimes pretty rough, and we had some just poor behavior, non-eye contact during meetings, and just childish behavior from grown men. But their body language certainly told them they didn't respect the leader, but they also didn't respect the values that we were trying to espouse in the workplace. And we just stayed consistent and said this is what we expect. We're not seeing it. The supervisor and would write them up or do some verbal coaching, and eventually, two of a team of 5 chose to leave. And while there were still a couple that weren't overly respectful, the instigators were not there to bring a majority to the team anymore. And we've since hired some good mechanics who also are able to live these values that we would like to see. So it's still in progress. There's some days that aren't as good, but certainly now that we have an expectation that new employees expect, they're holding some of the older employees accountable. Say, this is what my boss said we're supposed to do. How come you're not doing it? So
yeah. Well, and I'm gonna switch us to our 3-headed view here. One of the things that I loved about what you just said about crafting the bullet points under the values, so they were simple. They weren't complex. They weren't, complex psychological, theories. They were literally, it's like with respect, do what you say you're going to do. And it's simple. And it's stated formally in I do what I say I will do. So it's an I statement for me, which means that everybody that lives in that organization has to live by those. But the trick is not painting those valued behaviors on every conference room or the wall of the plant, because that's not how it gets embedded. It gets embedded by senior leaders living it, coaching it, praising it when they see it, redirecting it when they're not, and then that trickles down to soups, and that is happening now. But part of what I think is interesting is you might have had 20-year employees in 2018 when you guys took over the operation of the plant. They had been trained very well on how to interact with each other, interact with management. So you're being asked to craft new habits, certainly for the leadership team and for those supervisors as well. Have you seen that happen over time?
We have. I would say most of the older generation employees that came with us actually we're just happy to see, hey, we have a management team that wants to hold accountability. They want to make this a better place for us to work in. And for the most part, a lot of them did embrace it. Maybe not overly vocal in their teams, but one-on-one with their supervisors and with me, they would share that. Thanks for sticking up for what's right. And
it seems certainly to be.
We have hired over half. We have about 55 employees in our company or plant operation here, and over half of those have joined us, since 2018, and about 2/3 of that in the last 3 or 4 years. So we've had a lot of turnover, a lot of new employees, and so we have that mix of older generation legacy employees who know the plant well. That's good. They don't always have the greatest leadership skills, but for the most part, they're open to learning those. And I think you've seen that with our operations team, that there's some pushback from the leaders there. Hey, this is my team. We're the best of the 4 teams, and you hear that from 4 different leaders.
Exactly.
Trying to get them to be,
that was consistent. Yes.
Yeah, it's the working with that we need to kind of evolve to. I want to ask about if you all, as a leadership team, had 2 or 3 core issues that you had kind of talked about and formalized, maybe, and in essence, we're hoping that this culture structure was going to help get some traction on those issues. Have those issues changed over the last 3 years? They might well have, but what are the things that you all as a leadership team from a culture standpoint are working on today to kind of continue to gain traction on your ideal culture?
Well, the 2 that come to mind are respect and accountability. I think with our setting our values, the respect, you either are or you aren't respectful. And, there's not often a lot of gray area there. And honestly, that was the area where some of the employees chose to leave. They're bad mouthing their leader wasn't no longer tolerated, and they could not take it upon themselves to work in an environment where their bad behavior was being called out, and so some of them chose to leave. The bigger, broader area is accountability. Just like we talked about these 4 shift teams that were 12 hours on, 12 hours off, that when they're there, they're the only, they're the main team that's running the plant. And like I said, each team thinks they're the best at everything. And so accountability between teams, we were the best. We turned it over to the next team and they said, well, you left us a mess. You left us, things that should have been done on your shift, and a lot of cross finger pointing. And you mentioned our, rating of our operations team recently. That's where a lot of that still came out. We're doing okay, but everybody else isn't. And that's the nut we continue to need to try to crack and try to get consistency. And so working with our senior leaders to how do we do that? Our leaders aren't with them at least half of the, 2/3 of the time they're operating the plant. And how do we get to where we are really being consistent? And each of the teams agree, hey, the other teams are being consistent with us.
And we talked some about the need to recruit new people, mostly because typical business reasons, of course, people move on even if there isn't a culture change going on. But you talked about the people who left strictly because of the culture change process as one of the core issues and challenges you had to overcome back then. What other challenges did you and your leadership team have around this time? We just come out of the pandemic, right? We know you have near constant funding issues with the county and the state, and you're constantly juggling those issues. But what else were you working on at the time? What challenges did you have to overcome specific to culture? And how hard was it to juggle your focus on culture while you were dealing with all those other things?
Good questions. I would say the biggest thing coming out of the pandemic was that the teams had been able to isolate. I mean, literally from the COVID, but also to operate in a totally isolated manner where they weren't micromanaged by their leader. They could kind of do what they wanted to do. The plant still ran, but they didn't shift change very well. Shift change, we like to have some information shared across from the outgoing shift to the incoming shift. The longer term practices there eroded. And we just had 4 different silos of operations that had been allowed or forced to exist through COVID. And since 2022, 23, when we're back and open again, some of those habits and behaviors haven't changed as quickly as they were formed. So we're still dealing with some of that.
Did you ever look at the culture initiative and go, you know what? Not right now. I got other stuff to deal with. The culture thing can wait a week. Or was this a constant, consistent effort on not just your behalf, but your entire team? How was there ever a time where the struggle, you just kind of went, okay, pause?
I don't think we ever hit a point where we said we need to pause. Some things slowed down, like maybe some of our surveying and measuring got a little longer period than maybe we had it intended originally. But I think we had a leadership team that was committed to making sure we continue this. Once we got the first survey results for our executive team and then for each of our leaders, there was some shock. There was some, I didn't expect this. But when we got around to improving our behaviors and seeing a second set of results, it was confirming that this can work. Or confirm that, hey, year 3 didn't look as good, and we didn't continue to get better. We kind of stagnated from one year to the next, and committed to ourselves that we need to keep this very consistent and in front of our employees frequently. So,
well, with our meetings with the ops folks, and we've had a couple of sessions over the last 2 years with that maintenance team. They were the first non-formal leaders that got exposed to the values and behaviors assessment and the coaching around that. I think what is interesting is that everybody's got an opinion about everybody else. That is the same across all of our clients. It's a little bit bolder when you've got those shift changes happening, because you can literally see it and hear it if it's not going well. If there's not proactive, I'm working on that, or we're waiting for a part for that, all of those things are going to make the incoming team feel like, you're setting me up for failure, or, geez, you're really taking care of things. That's pretty cool. We didn't hear a lot of the taking care of things. And I think that's mostly because it felt like, and this is very, very, very common, that frontline doesn't get heard very well, right? They don't get a voice to kind of express their frustrations. And the assessment can do that. The assessment can provide some insights. And I think and Tim, the three of us have talked about this for a couple of years. You've got a leadership team, an executive team now that is very committed to the culture, that understands they can't be casual with the way they treat others, because it's going to come back and maybe ding their, assessment scores. But the next level leaders, because they're so close to those front operators and just the madhouse that there's 300 things that have to get fixed in the next hour kind of a thing to keep the plant running. Those soups seem to maybe be in a vice a little bit, pressed up a little bit, where they understand that their role is pretty critical for the change to continue, but they're also maybe exhausted at doing those 300 things every hour. Do you see that as well, Tim?
Yeah, you're hitting on something good there. The middle management and our frontline leaders, they're in the dirt and grime and running the plant, and sometimes they don't take time to communicate with the values that we say. They revert back to the old way. I wouldn't say it's probably still better than 5 years ago, but there's that habit. Under pressure, we let the values go in our communication and expectations. And, senior leaders don't often see that. That may go on for a while before we're able to call that out, or we see it in a survey score or something. And so it's a constant keeping this in front of all of us, both our senior leaders, our mid leaders, and our frontline leaders, and then holding our employees' workforce accountable to continuing these values. It's probably a never-ending process.
Yeah.
But I'm convinced it still makes for a better workplace for all if we keep it part of our culture.
Tim, how we talked a lot about your frontline leaders and the people actually working and running the plant. How would they describe your culture now, and maybe put it in terms of this is what it was 3.5, 4 years ago versus right now? Are they enjoying coming to work every day, or at least enjoying it more?
I'm pretty sure they're enjoying it more. They probably aren't enjoying it, every single day, but my sense is they appreciate the effort that leadership has put into this. We have a common language about talking about values. We're trying to measure them. We're not at the table hearing everything that's going on, in their break rooms and between teams. But they know that there's a commitment for that. And so I think there's what we've seen in the last couple of years, and you mentioned it with our operations team, there's kind of a reverse frustration now that, leadership says to do this, follow these values, but I'm not seeing it from my coworkers or from that other team. And my frontline leader is maybe being lax in supporting those values and behaviors. And so I think they're at the point where maybe they're not calling out their supervisor, but they're not seeing that it's those values and leadership of those values is cemented into our core or our frontline leaders yet. So I think, that's some of the coaching you've done, and you could probably talk more about what you've seen with our frontline leaders, because some of them have pushed back on, hey, this is not what I signed up for as a leader.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. You're facing. We talked just briefly about Steve Juba, and his last day at work was Friday. And he reached out to us saying how much he enjoyed working on this culture work and appreciated some of our coaching. And of course, we very much appreciated his voice as for the operations crew. It was a very vital voice. And we talked about the maintenance team manager, and he retired about 6 months ago, if I am remembering that.
It was end of September, I think.
Okay.
Early October. Yeah. So, within the second half of last year.
And so you've got a new player taking that role, but he'd been on the team, had been a very strong player on the team. And so one of the first things that Tina Gemlow did, your HR director, reached out to Mark and me and says, we need you to get this new leader.
Get with John.
Let's get John in a meeting or two to kind of coach him and say, okay, yes, you've inherited a maintenance team. There's obviously maintenance needs every moment on every square inch of the plant, and that's half your job. So let us maybe coach you a bit on how you can model the values, catch people doing things right, redirect when you need. And I think he's inherited a team, as you said, with some of the changes on that team, with fewer instigators and quite a few more folks that really do buy into the respect and validation side of the work that they're doing.
Well, and Tim, I'll share with you that you said you had a plan of 55, 60 workers. Chris and I see what you described, that peer accountability. We see it in companies of 60,000, where once the values are established, and for the most part, we all agree these are our values that we try to model, maybe not every conversation, maybe not every day, but this becomes our bloodline. We've seen it. Global corporation, 60,000 people. Chris and I will get an email or a call and go, not sure what to do, but I mean, I'm just a field engineer, but my boss is not embracing these values at all, and I don't know what to do. So it's really interesting. You at a certain point in this process, and Chris and I always start CEO and down, because we strongly believe if the top doesn't buy in, not something you can delegate, not something HR can do. If the person at the very top isn't completely bought in and willing to model the values themselves, then this can't work. Well, what happens a couple of years into this, or maybe 12, 18 months, right, Chris, is the peers start holding themselves and each other accountable, even sometimes when a frontline manager doesn't. And specifically, they start holding their managers accountable to say, you know what, I've had 3 conversations in the last 2 weeks that did not feel like they were mutually respectful at all. And this team is not living their values. And so we get this peer-to-peer, even bottom-up push. Although it starts top-down, it inevitably, right, Chris, goes to bottom-up. And people start to not just hold themselves more accountable, but hold each other and their bosses more accountable.
We had an interesting conversation on a couple of the ops teams a month ago. And it was, sometimes, they're referring to the members of the other team. Sometimes my brothers don't realize how much time they cost us, how much energy they cost us when they don't communicate. A machine that's not working, or it's on its last legs and it's a 3-hour changeover, or whatever it is. And Mark specifically jumped in and said, you can challenge those folks from a value side, from an accountability side. And you're not just trying to stab them in the back. You're not trying to do the we're better than you are kind of a thing, but it's here's what we all commit to doing. And they nodded their heads. I don't know that they immediately went out and started to coach their team members quickly, but it was a cool opportunity at that stage. And I think there was much more willingness from these frontline operators than Mark and I expected.
To share, this is the problem that's causing me and my team and the extra work, and not to have, not to
And
be complaining, but to just share the facts of what those decisions cost us.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, every team would probably say they could spend 2 hours every transition having those conversations. Well, yes, maybe, but let's raise up the conversation. So you all, if you're the best team, then you would never do that to the team you're transitioning over at the end of your shift, right? So it starts to increase the opportunity for them to literally stand up and say, come on, let's fix this because it's going to make everybody's lives easier.
Well, to that point, Chris, before we move on to the next question, I will volunteer, and I don't think the guys and the gals on the ops team would contradict me at all. They, within our Zoom meetings with 5 or 6, 7 of them in the room, they held each other accountable and said, you know what, we gotta stop. What's the cliche? Worshiping the problem. We can't just throw our union brothers and sisters under the bus. We have to think about the solution. And Chris and I, probably under our breath, went, "Oh, hell yes."
We didn't.
Again, these are not managers, right? They just want people who want to enjoy their work, right?
Yeah.
Who want to feel validated and respected. And so, and to that end, they were going to each other, going, "Hold it, time out. No, this is not working for me." And so it was a very good thing to see.
Well, and with safety as your first value in the STEAM acronym, and in a plant environment, there's folks can get hurt real fast and real badly. And they talked about that. Let's make sure that we're not putting anybody's safety at risk. And it's like, boy, that's terrific. And again, talking about it in that meeting may not immediately translate to them doing it, but it certainly increases the likelihood of some of those conversations happening. Let me ask Tim from a leadership perspective, and maybe starting with the executive team, your direct team. What are the next steps for the executive team in this culture evolution? What challenges do you guys anticipate are coming a year or two down the road?
Well, I think being consistent and, not letting this drop, we didn't focus on it very much this year. And then, we're starting over. So trying to be consistent with that. We have some leadership change. And although it's our new plant facility manager who's on our team, it's a new personality, and making sure that Dan is as engaged as Steve was, and and that I can help in that transition here. Not letting anything drop. I think we really need to focus on those frontline leaders and making sure that they feel valued and listened to, because they see what's happening every shift, and they feel sometimes they aren't heard up through the chain of command. And I want to make sure that we have availability of hearing them. One thing that Tina, our HR leader, had recommended, and we're going to try, is where I actually will make myself available for 1 or 2 operators on shift to just have a chit chat with me. Tell me what's going on. Let me know. Outside of their frontline leader, just one or 2 guys at a time. Tell me what's going on so I can figure out how we could better resource you and bring continued value to your work here without the bickering and challenges between teams and between you and management and other things. So we haven't had a lot of volunteers yet, but we're going to start. I'll just going to start showing up in the control room and having 1 or 2 people get 5-10 minutes of their time with me and get more face time down in the plant.
You're going to volunteer them. I get it.
That's exactly the case. Well, I think that's a tremendous opportunity. It's very rare, as you know, in a more blue collar environment for that kind of exposure of the president CEO sitting right here in a chair across from me. What are we going to talk about? And I will say, based upon the openness that these folks challenged Mark and me with last month, you may get an earful, but it's going to be rooted in truth, and truth that is frustrating for folks, right? It's not working well. And I've tried to coach, I've tried to, bribe somebody with whatever, right? And it's not getting better, and it's frustrating. And again, it could have a safety impact. So I think you're going to hear a lot, which is going to be terrific. And I would hope that Dan's probably got a great opportunity to do the same thing with those operations folks as the new leader of the operations side of the plant.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he came out of the plant. He wasn't an operator, but he has spent a lot of face time with the operations teams, in his technical role previously. And I'm looking forward to him having a different ear than Steve did for our plant team.
Yeah, exactly.
So Tim, when I remember our very first phone call with you, you were vulnerable enough in that moment to say, "Look, I don't know what I'm doing. I've read your book. I've had my team read your book, but I admit I don't know how to do this. I was never trained how to do this." And we shared with you that this culture change is not something we teach in business school. It isn't something we read in books until recently. It isn't something our mentors or predecessors, they couldn't offer us been there, done that advice because they had not been there and they had not done that. Right. So with all that in mind, you're 2.5, 3 years into this process. Your company is a culture success story. I mean, you've made huge changes. Maybe they haven't trickled all the way down yet, but we've seen it. And the feedback, the quantified feedback that we help you collect every 6 months proves that. It's social proof that change has been real. So with all this in mind, and now that you are one of the few executives on the planet that have personally led a culture change, what lessons did you learn along the way? And what would you share with other executives that might be considering the same journey?
Well, be vulnerable. Realize you don't know what you're doing part of the time, but you're willing to step out and learn, to look for processes, systems, to help. And then once you have those, be consistent. And if I were designing it from the start, the fact that with our interaction with your team, Chris and Mark, we measure, and you can't argue with some data. Now and especially across the plant team, it's from their perspective. And if they're not feeling heard, they're not feeling that things are being taken seriously, that we have to respect that. And showing the data that we are spending money on that equipment, or we are training our leaders, or whatever the thing is, but not poo-poo their feeling on it. That if they are feeling that's real to them, and we need to have conversation and get better at that. So being consistent, and we're 3+ years into this, I don't see it changing. It's part of the way we do business at the plant in Minneapolis.
Well, and I love to hear you speak to the fact that when you're hiring new players, be they from within the plant, like Dan's case, where he'd been in the plant for quite a while and moved into that senior role with plant operations. But even with frontline team members, you are using the values, the STEAM acronym, and the behaviors as part of the interview process. You are letting folks know that this is what you're going to be living in. Are you sure that you're going to be able to kind of manage? Let's talk about civility first, and then maybe we can work to respect, kind of a thing. But I think that is a huge contributor to the whole plant community moving on towards this is right. This is what we need to do. This is best for everybody.
Well, and sometimes sorry, Tim, I just want to point this out because we heard this from the operations guys. Sometimes this is what I was told in the job interview, and this is not currently happening. And so I'm frustrated and I'm disappointed, and I want to get back to what we talked about in the job interview. And it's pretty interesting and we have several other clients that have made their values. We have one client, the CEO literally walks in on the interview, puts a one-pager down that describes their values and says, this is what we live by. This is what we expect from each other. This is what we will expect from you. Can you live by this? Can you model these behaviors? Can you communicate in such a way that demonstrates, that you believe in these behaviors and these values? And it makes a world of difference in the hiring process. And I'm sure Tina on your team has seen that. And I know we got feedback on that with the frontline team saying, yeah, sometimes this just feels like bullshit. Sometimes we don't do this at all.
Yeah.
And we like it when we do, but what recourse do we have when we don't? What can we do when this does not happen? And very constructive questions. And again, shows an effort to hold each other and their bosses accountable.
Yeah. It's been a long journey for you, Tim, and we are always very focused upon the senior leader that usually we work with. And we've certainly engaged with you quite regularly and kind of talked about different members of the executive team. And this one seems a little quiet, and this one seems like they're into it, that kind of thing. So you've learned a great deal about culture change. And you're not done yet, but you've come a tremendous ways with this organization and this community of leaders and team members. Is there anything you do differently that you know better now than you did when we all started together?
Well, if I was aware of it, I would have started it earlier.
Yeah, there is that.
Probably be a little more consistent. Not let so much time go between the conversations between our leaders and you assume, everybody's busy. You don't need to do it once a month, a couple times a month. But if you don't, it lags, and there's invariably balls get dropped, and that's where the team members see inconsistency, and they're not living their values that they want us to live them, and just have our leaders be more consistent and be able to embrace the values. I would say like our senior leaders do, but our embrace of it doesn't always trickle through the frontline leaders, and we're still working on that.
Well, and we're going to be right there helping you. And we would agree that those frontline leaders have got, they're in a tough spot. right? They had, for many of them, they were working alongside these operations team members and for years and were friends, and now they're a boss. And that's an interesting transition. And it's not only interesting from a managing results process, but now we're throwing in managing respect. And again, a lot of leaders just have never been shown how to do that properly and consistently. So again, we're so grateful for the opportunity that we've had to work with your team. We know we're not done yet, and we know that there's huge. If we meet again in a year with those frontline operations team members, which would be about the cycle once a year for those individual team members to get their values and behavior survey results back, I'm hopeful that they'll tell us, man, what did you feed those supervisors? Because they're really different. They are consistent. They are holding everybody to these rules, to these values. And that's something Mark and I would love to have happen.
Well, we need to together make that happen, and I look forward for the day that we can say everybody's noticed that.
Yeah, it's going to come. It really will. Well, one of the things that we do, and we warned you that we'll talk for about an hour, and here we are 52 minutes in. But the last few minutes, we typically talk about kind of non-work stuff. So I loved in your bio, you talked about the Minnesota cabin life. And we've got some of our team members, Mark and I talk about who's in the band, and it's that instrument thing here, that musician thing. And we've got a team in central Minnesota that runs our websites, that has created a bunch of our systems that we use. And it's like, boy, if I could get more folks like that to be working with us. And we've got a great team that's working with us with the podcast. But the cabin life is kind of fun. So having never quite done that myself, we've both done some cabins up here in the mountains in Colorado, and Mark also in Tahoe. But what's your cabin life like for you and Mary and maybe the kids and their families?
Well, we're both our families transplants to Minnesota, but we've been here going on 40 years. And Minnesota has 15,000 lakes. It's the land of 10,000 lakes, but it's really 15,000 plus. So there's a lot of water, a lot of lake shore, and a very short summer. But being able to get out and just be in nature, be in a community along the lake, being on a boat, fishing, boating, playing in the water. We started visiting, renting cabins with our young family, and just, enjoyed that so much. We eventually found a place of our own, and now sharing it with grandkids and extended family. And we have sleepovers with our own friends.
Cool.
Couples that visit cabin to cabin. It's just part of our social life, and it's we love it. And we've come to do it summer, spring, fall, and even a little bit in winter. So I just spent the weekend ice fishing with my son in the big lake in central Minnesota this last weekend. So if you haven't done that, you should try that. Drill a hole in the water and catch a fish. So.
Well, next time we come to see you, Chris, we should do it on a Friday so we can go ice fishing on a Saturday.
That would be.
I'll get my son to guide us.
There you go. That would be cool. I will look like one of the South Park kids with so many layers I can't bend my arms, but I'll be there. Well, Tim, thank you for the opportunity to learn from you, and we appreciate the time you've not only invested in this in this process, but in sharing some of your insights over the past 3 years.
Well, it's been a pleasure working with you, both of you. And reading the book initially, I could tell your heart and your sentiment and your goal to make workplaces better. And I'm happy that we're in the middle of doing that here in Minneapolis.
Yeah, absolutely. We're still with you, man. Mark, anything to add, sir?
Well, just on a personal note, we know your plant is downtown Minneapolis, and we know Minneapolis has been in the news a lot lately. So just encourage you and your team to stay safe and to stay warm, and our thoughts are with all of you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a kind of tough environment to be around right now.
Yeah, it is. Well, again, stay safe, stay warm. Thank you, Tim. And listeners, please do look for the next episode. And we know that some of the guests we have coming are going to be equally as informative and great storytellers like Tim is. So thank you for listening and or watching, and we will see you very soon.
This has been Mastering Workplace Culture. No jargon, no corporate fairy tales, just leaders who show their scars and celebrate their wins. Do something with what you heard today. Subscribe, share, take action. Creating a culture that equally values respect and results is your responsibility. Go own it. When you're ready to make that happen, we're here to help. We'll catch you in the next episode of Mastering Workplace Culture.